Today, we're going to hit the road to terror with 7 chilling stories involving fatal hitchhikers. Get ready to hear scary stories about sinister encounters on deserted roads, mysterious passengers, and trips that started with a simple act of kindness, but ended in true nightmares. So settle in, make sure your car doors are locked, and let's begin this chilling journey. Oh, and before some stranger asks for a ride, take the opportunity to subscribe to the channel, activate the bell, and leave a like. This helps the channel a lot and ensures that you don't miss any scary content like this. Let's go. The application Sophia Martins, a 22-year-old college student, was always looking for ways to save money. Living far from campus, she relied on a popular ride-sharing app to get around. The app promised safety, rigorous driver ratings, and routes optimized for passenger comfort. At first, everything seemed normal. Sophia used the same driver, a man named Lucas, who always arrived on time and maintained a polite and friendly conversation. He seemed to know the city well, and his routes, while not always the fastest, were always smooth and without incident. As the weeks passed, however, Sophia began to notice strange patterns in the routes Lucas took. Instead of taking the most direct route, he would often take detours down less busy streets, sometimes passing through neighborhoods Sophia was completely unfamiliar with. These areas were dark, with few people on the streets, and the feeling of isolation grew with each trip. One rainy night, when Lucas took an even bigger detour, Sophia decided to pay attention. She discreetly opened the app on her phone and started writing down the places they passed, trying to understand the reason for those winding paths. Over time, she realized that Lucas's routes coincided with areas where, according to local news, several women had disappeared in recent months. The coincidence was too frightening to ignore. Sophia began researching and discovered reports of victims who used the same app to get around, all with a common pattern. The driver was always the same. Determined to understand what was happening, Sophia installed a tracking app on her phone and began secretly recording their conversations and journeys. She discovered that Lucas was collecting detailed information about his passengers, their schedules, routes, habits, and even personal contacts. It was all part of an elaborate scheme to select and study his victims before taking action. Fear began to consume Sophia. She avoided going out alone, changing her schedule and routes, but Lucas always seemed one step ahead. One night, she received an anonymous message warning her to be careful around the driver. Her paranoia grew, but Sophia knew she had to act cautiously to avoid being discovered. One fateful night, Sophia arranged a ride with Lucas, pretending not to know anything. During the trip, she kept her cell phone recording and sending real-time data to a trusted friend. When Lucas tried to take a suspicious detour, Sophia pretended to be unwell and asked to get off immediately. She managed to escape, unharmed, but she knew she had to act quickly. With the evidence she had collected, she contacted the police, who began a detailed investigation. The authorities discovered that Lucas was part of a criminal network that used the app to kidnap women, selling information and even victims to dangerous groups. The police investigation was intense and meticulous. Authorities worked with digital security experts to track down the criminal network. Lucas was part of an organization that used drivers in various cities to monitor and kidnap victims. The police dismantled part of the network, but warned that the danger still persists on digital platforms. Despite the trauma, Sophia shared her story publicly. She participated in interviews and awareness campaigns, helping to warn others about the hidden risks in seemingly safe services. Her courage inspired changes in ride-hailing apps' safety policies, including stricter monitoring systems and accessible reporting channels. The impact on the community was profound. Many people began to question the safety of digital services and the importance of being alert to warning signs. Support groups were formed for victims of app-related crimes, offering psychological and legal support. For Sophia, recovery was a difficult process. She faced sleepless nights, anxiety and fear of leaving the house. The support of friends, family and professionals was essential, but the shadow of what she experienced never completely disappeared. His story, based on real events, serves as a warning to all who depend on technology for their mobility. Not all drivers are what they seem, and technology, while useful, can be a tool in the wrong hands. Constant vigilance and caution are the best defenses against hidden danger on seemingly safe routes. The empty road. The rain pelted the range. Rover's windscreen relentlessly as Richard Harlow drove along the country road. The 48-year-old executive was returning from a successful meeting in Leeds, pleased with the acquisition of yet another company for his portfolio. As CEO of Harlow Enterprises, he was used to making tough decisions, cutting costs, closing departments and laying off staff. Business was business after all. The storm intensified, turning the country road into a muddy river. Richard slowed down, cursing the GPS that was directing him along this shortcut to avoid the traffic jam on the highway. It was then that he spotted the lone figure, a soaking wet man waving desperately from the shoulder of the road. Richard hesitated. It wasn't like him to stop for strangers, but something about the vulnerability of the figure in the storm stirred a rare moment of compassion. He stopped the car. "Come in, quickly," he said, unlocking the doors. The man slid into the passenger seat, slim in his 40s, with graying hair plastered to his face from the rain. "Thanks," he muttered. "My car broke down a few miles back. No cell phone. Reception in this area. Where are you going?" Richard asked, turning on the heater. "Harrogate," the man replied. "Coincidentally the same as you, Mr. Harlow." Richard stiffened. He hadn't mentioned his name or destination. "How do you know who I am?" The man smiled faintly. "I worked for you, Harlow Enterprises accounting department. I doubt you remember me, Peter Simmons. I was just one of the 2018 employees you laid off in the great restructuring of 2022. Richard relaxed slightly. "A former employee, uncomfortable but understandable." "Ah, yes, tough times call for tough measures. I hope you found another job." "Eventually," Peter replied, staring at the road ahead. "After I lose my house and my wife." Silence hung heavy in the car. Richard increased the speed, eager to end this unpleasant encounter as quickly as possible. "That's a nice house you have in Harrogate," Peter commented casually. "Especially the conservatory your wife Caroline had built last year. The white roses are particularly impressive." Richard felt a shiver run down his spine. "How do you know about my garden?" "I know a lot of things," Peter continued, his voice now strangely calm. "I know that your son, Thomas, studies at the University of Edinburgh, that your daughter, Emma, takes riding lessons on Wednesdays. I know that you have a safe hidden behind the painting in your office where you keep compromising documents about your, shall we say, creative tax maneuvers." The executive gripped the steering wheel so hard his knuckles turned white. "Who the hell are you? What do you want?" "I've already told you who I am. Peter Simmons, the man whose life you destroyed with a signature, the man who has spent the last 2 years studying every detail of your existence, observing, planning." Richard realized with growing horror that there were no other cars on the road. The storm had completely cut them off. "This encounter was no accident," Peter continued. "Your GPS was hacked to take you on this specific route. Your phone has no signal because I'm using a jammer. Every detail was meticulously planned." "I'll leave you right here," Richard said, starting to slow down. "It won't," Peter replied calmly, revealing a syringe in his hand. "Because while you were talking about the successful acquisition, I injected an interesting substance into your arm. Do you feel the numbness starting, your vision getting blurry?" Richard realized with horror that his limbs were growing heavy, his reflexes slow. The road ahead seemed to undulate. "Don't worry. "I won't kill you," Peter explained, taking the wheel as Richard struggled to stay conscious. "Death would be too merciful. I have much more elaborate plans." The last images Richard captured were of Peter calmly driving his car down a dirt road, as he explained in disturbing detail how he planned to methodically dismantle the executive's life, ruining his reputation, exposing his secrets, destroying his family relationships. 3 days later, Richard's Range Rover was found, abandoned near Leeds. The executive was spotted wandering a country lane, disoriented and incoherent. Over the following months, incriminating documents about his business practices began to be leaked to authorities and the press. His wife filed for divorce after receiving emails detailing his extramarital affairs. Harlow Enterprises collapsed. Under tax investigations, Peter Simmons was never found. Police questioned the man's very existence, suggesting that Richard had fabricated the story during a nervous breakdown. After all, there was no Peter Simmons on the company's books. But Richard knows the truth. Sometimes, when he drives alone, he gets the unsettling feeling that he's being watched. And recently, he started receiving anonymous messages with a simple reminder: business is business, after all. Chat. The return night had fallen when Marta Vega, a 34-year-old nurse, was driving along the coastal road between Malaga and Almeria. After a double shift at the hospital, fatigue weighed heavily on her eyes, but she still had 2 hours to drive home. The road was practically deserted, as is typical for a Tuesday night in the low season. The headlights illuminated a figure on the side of the road, a young woman in her early 20s, her arm outstretched in the universal gesture of hitchhiking. Marta hesitated. Her parents had always warned her about the dangers of giving rides to strangers, especially at night. But something about the young woman's frightened expression, the way she hugged her body against the cold wind, awakened her instincts as a caregiver. He slowed down and stopped a few meters ahead. The young woman ran to the car, her dark hair flying in the wind. "Thank you," she said, sliding into the passenger seat. "I thought no one would stop." "Where are you going?" Marta asked, discreetly observing the passenger. Simple clothes, a small backpack, no makeup. She seemed harmless. "Almeria," the young woman replied. "My name is Lucia." "Marta, what are you doing alone on the road at this time?" Lucia sighed, dramatically. "My boyfriend and I had a fight. He dropped me off at the gas station back there and drove off. Idiot." As Marta drove, she asked casual questions. Lucia said she was a student in Granada, visiting relatives in Malaga, and now needed to get to Almeria to catch a bus home. The story seemed plausible, but small inconsistencies began to emerge. First, Lucia mentioned visiting her grandmother. Then she referred to the same person as her aunt. She said she was studying nursing, but she didn't recognize any of the basic terms Marta mentioned. "How long have you and your boyfriend been together?" asked Marta. 3 years, Lucia replied promptly. "Since high school." "I thought you studied." "In Granada." A brief silence. "Yes, we moved there together." When Lucia went to the bathroom during a gas stop, Marta took the opportunity to quickly search her phone for recent incidents in the area. What she found made her blood run cold. 3 drivers had disappeared on that same road in the last 2 months, all after allegedly offering a ride to a young woman. Police suspected a serial killer, but there were no solid leads. Searching deeper, with trembling fingers, Marta found a news story from 6 months ago. Teen survives attack by highway killer. The photo showed a girl in the hospital, pale, bruised, but unmistakably Lucia. According to the story, she had been the sole survivor of a hitchhiker who preyed on lone drivers. The suspect was never caught. When Lucia returned to the car, Marta forced a smile, trying to hide her growing panic. Her mind was working frantically. Why would the survivor of an attack be hitchhiking in the same area? Why the inconsistencies in the story? Is everything okay? Lucia asked, noticing Marta's tension. Yeah, just tired. Long shift at the hospital. Are you a doctor? Nurse, I work in the emergency room. Marta decided to take a chance. We see a lot of trauma cases, including victims of assault, like the recent case of the highway killer. Lucia's face hardened for an almost imperceptible moment before softening again. I heard about that. Terrible. Marta noticed something disturbing. A small scar on Lucia's hand that had not been visible before, and now he noticed a suspicious bulge in the young woman's coat pocket. Pretending to receive a call, Marta answered the silent cell phone. Hello? Yes, I'm on my way. About 40 minutes. Yes, I took the 340. I'm with the passenger, Lucia. We're going to Almeria. She looked meaningfully at the young woman. Yes, I'll send you my location in real time. Lucia changed her posture, visibly uncomfortable. You don't need to inform about me. I prefer discretion. Just my husband, Marta lied. He always worries when I travel at night. Over the next few miles, the tension in the car was palpable. Marta kept a steady speed, looking for a safe place to stop. A police station, a busy area. Lucia grew increasingly agitated, constantly checking her watch. Can we take that side road? Lucia suggested suddenly. It's a shortcut to Almeria that I know. I prefer to stay on the main road, safer at night. Lucia reached into her pocket. I insist. At that moment, Marta saw the lights of a police car stopped at a speed radar a few meters ahead. Without hesitation, he stepped on the accelerator. What are you doing? Lucia shouted, pulling a metal object from her pocket. Marta ignored the speed limit, deliberately speeding past the speed camera. The police car's lights immediately came on, and the siren sounded. What followed was chaotic. Lucia trying to open the moving door, Marta blocking the controls, the police car catching up with them. When they finally stopped, Lucia was detained. With a serrated knife and sedatives in her possession, the investigation revealed the disturbing truth. After surviving the original attack, Lucia developed a fascination with her attacker. When he was found dead, a suicide in prison, she decided to continue his work. 3 drivers had already been his victims. The case of the returned, as the press called her, shocked Spain. For Marta Vega, who received a citizenship award, there remains the recurring nightmare of how an act of kindness nearly turned into tragedy, and the knowledge that not all victims become survivors. Some turn into something much worse. Hey guys, the stories of fatal hitchhikers are still pretty chilling, aren't they? If you're enjoying these scary stories, take a quick break, subscribe to the channel, and leave a like. This really helps the channel grow and motivates me to keep bringing you more chilling content. Now let's get back to the next stories. There's still a lot of scary stuff ahead. The last race, Miguel Herrera swiped his finger across his phone screen, accepting the ride that had just appeared. Last passenger of the day, he thought, checking the destination. A neighborhood on the outskirts of the city that he didn't know well. After 3 years as a ride-sharing driver, this would be his last day. Tomorrow, he would start his new job as a security guard with fixed hours and benefits. The clock read 10:47 p.m. when the passenger got into the car, a man of about 40, wearing a dark jacket despite the heat of the Mexican night. Grey hair at the temples, thin-rimmed glasses, and a serious expression. Good evening, Miguel greeted. To Tlalpan, right? The man nodded without smiling. Yes, I'll continue guiding as we get closer. Miguel began the journey, discreetly observing his passenger in the rearview mirror. Something about him seemed out of the ordinary. His rigid posture, his attentive gaze that scrutinized Miguel's every move, his hand that never left the inside pocket of his jacket. After 20 minutes, they left the busiest areas of the city. The streets became narrower, less well lit. The GPS indicated that they were moving away from their original route. "I think we're getting off track," Miguel commented, trying to keep his voice casual. "Continue following my instructions," the passenger replied. "Take a right at the next one." The apprehension grew. Miguel knew stories of drivers being robbed and kidnapped. He considered ending the ride, but something about the passenger's authority made him continue. "Stop here," the man ordered as they reached an abandoned industrial area. Miguel stopped, keeping the engine running, ready to accelerate if necessary. The passenger made no move to get out. Instead, he pulled from his pocket not a gun, as Miguel had feared, but a police badge. "Detective Raul Vega, Missing Persons Unit," he introduced himself. "Don't worry, you're not in danger. At least not from me." "What does that mean?" asked Miguel, confused. "It means you've caught our attention, Mr. Herrera. 7 people have gone missing in the last 4 months. They all had one thing in common. They were last seen getting into ride-hailing cars, and you were the driver on 3 of those occasions." Miguel's blood ran cold. "That's absurd. I've never hurt anyone." "I didn't say you were responsible," Vega continued calmly, "but there is a pattern. Besides, we found out today is your last day as a driver. Interesting coincidence. I got a better job. That's not a crime. Of course not. But 5 other drivers also abruptly quit their jobs after being the last people to see missing passengers. None of these drivers have been found since." Reality hit Miguel like a punch. "Are you saying the drivers are gone too?" Vega nodded. "Exactly. Our theory is that there's someone using the app to target victims, both passengers and drivers. Someone who has access to the system to manipulate records, erase evidence. Why are you telling me this? Why did you bring me here?" "Because you could be next, Miguel. Or worse, you could be the one to blame. I needed to observe your reaction away from cameras and witnesses." Miguel felt panic rising. "I'm innocent. I have a family, a new job." "I believe you," Vega said, after a moment of consideration. "But it means you're in danger. Someone is eliminating connections, erasing traces. If you follow the pattern, you'll be gone within the next 48 hours. What do I do?" "First, don't go home tonight. Second, give me access to your app. We need to check who assigned those specific rides to you." As Miguel unlocked his phone, he noticed a dark car park silently a few feet away, headlights off. "Detective," he whispered, indicating with a nod. Vega looked over discreetly. "Don't move. It might be a coincidence, but..." The vehicle door opened. A figure emerged from the shadows, approaching slowly. "Start the car," Vega ordered, drawing his gun. "When I tell you to, accelerate." The figure was less than 10 meters away now, a tall man wearing a uniform similar to that of the app companies. "Employees." "Now!" Vega shouted. Miguel slammed his foot on the accelerator. The car shot forward as a loud bang ripped through the air. The figure had drawn a gun. Vega responded with 2 shots through the shattered rear window, driving frantically through the deserted streets. Miguel followed the detective's urgent instructions until they reached a police station. Over the next few hours, a police operation was mounted. The investigation revealed a criminal network operating within the ride-hailing company, a group that selected victims for human trafficking, using drivers as unwitting middlemen before eliminating them to cover their tracks. 2 days later, a police operation rescued 5 of the 7 missing people, including 3 drivers, from an industrial warehouse on the outskirts of the city. Those responsible, including an IT manager from the ride-sharing company that manipulated the ride-sharing algorithms, were arrested. For Miguel Herrera, who testified in the case that the Mexican press has dubbed Los Desaparecidos del Aplicativo, the last ride truly marked the end of his career as a driver. Now, working as a security guard and reunited with his family, he still double-checks before getting into any ride-hailing vehicle. And for ride-hailing users around the world, the nagging question remains, who else might be watching their travel? Patterns waiting for the perfect moment to turn a simple ride into a traceless disappearance. 5. The truck stop. Irina Volkova adjusted the mirrors of her truck as she pulled into a rest stop 200 kilometers, 125 miles, from Novosibirsk. At 42, she was one of the few female truck drivers on the Trans-Siberian Railway, hauling cargo between Moscow and Vladivostok. 15 years on the road had taught her how to survive the harsh Siberian winter and deal with the dangers that lone drivers face. The temperature outside was 20 degrees when Irina entered the cafe for a quick coffee. That was when she noticed the young woman, no more than 25 years old, her face marked by a fresh bruise, her eyes constantly scanning the entrance. "More coffee?" the attendant asked Irina. "Da," he replied, never taking his eyes off the young woman. Something about the girl's posture screamed danger, not as a threat but as cornered prey. When a drunk truck driver began harassing the young woman, Irina intervened. "Leave her alone, Dmitri. Stay out of it, Volkova," he grumbled, walking away. The young woman looked at Irina gratefully. "Thank you. I'm Natasha." "Where are you going, Natasha?" Irina asked, noticing the small, worn backpack under the table. "Anywhere away from here," he replied, lowering his voice. "I'm trying to get to Irkutsk." Irina hesitated. Offering a ride was risky, but something about Natasha's vulnerability triggered her protective instincts. "I'm heading east. I can drop you off in 3 days." In the truck, as they drove through the endless white landscape, Natasha gradually revealed her story. She had fled Perm, where her boyfriend Alexei had been holding her captive. "He's not just violent," she explained. "He's involved with dangerous people, drug trafficking." Irina nodded, keeping her eyes on the road. She was well aware of the human trafficking rings that operated along the truck routes, shipping women from Russia to Western Europe and the Middle East. On the second night, they stopped at a secluded gas station to rest. While Natasha slept in the cab, Irina checked her truck. That's when she noticed the small magnetic device hidden under the fender. A tracker. Back in the cabin, he confronted Natasha. "Who's following us?" The terror in the young woman's eyes was genuine. "They found me. We need to leave now." "Who are they?" "Alexei and his associates. He's not just an abusive boyfriend. He's a recruiter for a drug trafficking ring. I was helping him without knowing it. He was using me as bait." The revelation hit Irina like a punch. "Bait for what?" "To lure in lonely truckers," Natasha whispered. "I would hitchhike, gain the driver's trust. In remote areas, Alexei and others would appear, attack the driver and steal the cargo. Drivers who resisted disappeared. The cargo went to the black market, and any attractive women found in the trucks were taken into the trafficking ring." Irina remembered reports of missing colleagues over the past 2 years. Authorities suspected common robberies, but never found those responsible. "Why did you run away now?" "I found out Alexei was planning to sell me too. I heard him negotiating with a buyer in Turkey." Natasha shivered. "But now they're following us. The tracker. They must have placed it when we stopped for gas," Irina thought quickly. Removing the tracker would alert the pursuers. Better to use it to her advantage. "I know this area," he said, starting the engine. "There's a highway patrol station 45 miles away. We can—" The high beams of a rapidly approaching vehicle interrupted her. It was not a police car. "Too late," Natasha muttered. Irina accelerated the truck, gaining temporary distance. "In the compartment under your seat there is a satellite phone. Code 5591. Then dial Mikhail Baranov, federal police officer. Tell him it's from me and our exact location." As Natasha made the call, Irina maneuvered the heavy vehicle along the winding road. The black SUV gained ground, pulling alongside the truck. A man in the passenger seat pointed a gun. "Get down!" Irina screamed. Seconds before the shots shattered the side window. Using her experience, Irina forced the SUV onto the snow-covered shoulder. The vehicle skidded but recovered, continuing the chase. Mikhail said he has a team 15 minutes away. Natasha said, gripping the dashboard as the truck jolted. We don't have 15 minutes, Irina replied, seeing a fork in the road ahead. She made the decision in seconds. She turned sharply onto a forest road, too narrow for quick maneuvers, but which she knew well from previous trips. The SUV continued the chase, slower now due to the terrain. When they reached a narrow bridge over a frozen river, Irina made her final move. She braked suddenly, causing the SUV to crash into the back of the truck. Before the occupants could recover, she accelerated again, pushing the smaller vehicle into the bridge railing, which gave way under the impact. The SUV plunged into the frozen river 30 feet below, partially breaking the ice. Irina did not stop to check on the occupants. She kept driving until she found the federal police car. 20 minutes later, the ensuing operation dismantled one of Siberia's largest human trafficking and cargo theft networks. Alexei and 2 accomplices were arrested. Those who fell into the river survived but were seriously injured. 12 other members of the organization were identified through testimony. 7 women destined for international trafficking were rescued from a warehouse in Novosibirsk. Natasha, under police protection, became a key witness in the trial. Irina Volkova received recognition from the Russian government for her courage, although she refused public ceremonies. She preferred the anonymity of the roads. For truckers who traverse the vast expanses of Siberia, the truck stop incident serves as a constant warning. And for Irina, who still hauls cargo on the Trans-Siberian Railway, each stop brings back memories of how a simple act of kindness nearly ended in tragedy, and how the unforgiving and lonely road hides dangers far more complex than ice and snow. The detour. Mark and Allison Chen were on day 4 of their honeymoon when their rental car began to stall on the road between Queenstown and Milford Sound. The smoke billowing from the bonnet left no doubt they were stranded on a country road surrounded only by the majestic New Zealand mountains and with no mobile phone signal. Great, Mark sighed, closing the hood after a futile inspection. We should have rented a newer model. Allison consulted the physical map they had thankfully purchased. The next town is about 20 miles away. We can start walking or... The sound of an engine interrupted her. A green Land Rover was slowly approaching. The couple exchanged hopeful glances. The vehicle pulled up beside them. The driver, a tanned man in his 50s with a neatly trimmed grey beard, rolled down his window. Car trouble? Yes, Mark replied. It looks like the engine. Could you give us a ride to the next town? Sure, the man smiled. I'm Jack Harmon. I know this area well. After transferring their backpacks to the Land Rover and noting the coordinates of the broken-down car to give to the rental company, the couple settled into the vehicle. Jack was communicative, sharing stories about the area as he expertly navigated the winding roads. You're American tourists, right? First time in New Zealand? Yes, Allison confirmed. We're on our honeymoon. Ah, newlyweds. Then you must see the best our land has to offer. In fact, Jack slowed, pointing to a dirt road that branched off to the right. There is an incredible viewpoint about 10 minutes from here. A panoramic view that few tourists know about. What do you think of a little detour? Mark hesitated. Actually, we're in a hurry to fix the car problem. It'll only be 10 minutes, Jack insisted. I promise you won't regret it. I've been a professional nature photographer for 20 years, and I know all the best angles in this area. Jack's enthusiasm was infectious, and the idea of seeing a secret location was tempting. The couple agreed. The dirt road wound up the mountain. 10 minutes turned into 20, and the vegetation grew denser by the minute. Mark began to feel a growing uneasiness, especially when he noticed Jack occasionally watching them in the rearview mirror with an expression that was hard to read. Is it much longer? Allison asked, nervously checking her watch. Just around the next bend, Jack replied. But while we're here, There's another even more impressive spot just 5 minutes away, a hidden waterfall that even the local guides don't know about. Before they could protest, Jack had already passed the supposed viewpoint and continued up. Mark and Allison exchanged worried glances. The road was now little more than a trail, and they hadn't passed another vehicle in over half an hour. "Mr. Harmon," Mark said firmly, "we appreciate your kindness, but we really need to get to town. Please let us return to the main road." Jack kept his smile, but something changed in his eyes. "You Americans, always in a hurry. Relax. You're in good hands." That's when Allison noticed something disturbing. A small pendant hanging from the rearview mirror that hadn't been there before. It appeared to be a gold chain with a wedding ring. Beside it, another jewel that resembled a woman's brooch. "Souvenirs from my previous guests," Jack commented, noticing Allison's gaze. "Everyone leaves something behind." Panic grew as Jack turned onto another, even more remote trail, completely ignoring the couple's pleas to turn back. Mark tried to open the door, only to discover that the child lock was engaged. "Don't make this any harder," Jack warned, his voice now cold. "I have a property down the road, very private, perfect for extended stays," as Jack casually explained. How other unfortunate tourists had contributed to his collection, Mark noticed a heavy tool in the side door compartment, a forgotten wrench. With a quick movement, he grabbed it and slammed it into Jack's arm as the vehicle made a sharp turn. The Land Rover skidded, leaving the road partially unmarked. In the confusion, Allison managed to unlock the doors using the central panel. The couple jumped out of the moving vehicle, rolling down the steep, overgrown slope. Wounded but conscious, they hid in the dense forest, while a limping and furious Jack searched for them with a shotgun. Using the orienteering training Mark had received as a Boy Scout, they managed to navigate south, eventually finding an official hiking trail. 6 hours later, exhausted and covered in scratches, they caught up with a group of tourists with a guide who immediately called the authorities. The subsequent investigation revealed the full horror. Jack Harmon, born Trevor Gaskell, was a predator wanted in Australia for 3 murders. He had settled in the remote New Zealand region 8 years ago, where his isolated property hid evidence of at least 7 disappearances. All foreign tourists whose cars had mysteriously broken down on country roads. In his cabin, police found a macabre collection of souvenirs, passports, jewelry, electronic devices and personal items from the victims, meticulously catalogued with dates and nationalities. More disturbing still, they discovered evidence that some victims had been kept alive for weeks before their final fate. For Mark and Allison Chen, whose story was widely publicized as a warning to tourists, their honeymoon turned into a nightmare. Now physically recovered, but still dealing with the trauma, they participate in awareness campaigns about travel safety. The confession. The afternoon sun gilded the Tuscan hills as Father Marco Ricci drove his modest Fiat along the winding road. At 58, after 2 decades of serving in the same parish in Florence, he had been transferred to a small country church near Siena. The change was welcome. The last few years in the city had been taxing, especially after the scandal that had divided his congregation. The GPS indicated another hour of travel when Father Marco spotted the lone figure at the side of the road, a middle-aged man with a small backpack, arm outstretched in the universal gesture of someone hitchhiking. "May God forgive me if I am reckless," the priest muttered, slowing down. Something in his calling always kept him from ignoring someone potentially in need. The man smiled as the car pulled up, tall, thin, with close-cropped grey hair and simple but clean clothes. "Thank you for stopping, Father," he said in Italian with a slight northern accent. "I'm trying to get to Siena before dark." "Happy coincidence," Father Marco replied as the man settled into the passenger seat. "I'm also heading near Siena. I'm Father Marco." "You can call me Antonio," the man replied, extending his hand in a firm shake. The first few miles were spent in easy conversation about the weather, the beauty of the Tuscan countryside, little observations about the villages. They passed. Antonio seemed polite and articulate, mentioning that he worked with people and was returning from a professional consultation in Florence. It was after a particularly sharp turn that the conversation took an unexpected turn. "Father, you hear confessions regularly, correct?" Antonio asked, his tone suddenly more serious. "Yes, it is a fundamental part of my ministry," Father Marco replied. "And is confessional secrecy absolute, even for serious crimes?" The priest glanced quickly at his passenger. "The seal of confession is inviolable, but I must encourage the penitent to seek appropriate justice, especially in serious cases." Antonio nodded thoughtfully. "Interesting. You know, Father, I've always wondered what it's like to carry the weight of other people's sins. It must be fascinating." "It is a sacred responsibility," the priest replied, feeling a slight uneasiness. "Allow me a hypothetical exercise," Antonio continued, adjusting his seat to better face the priest. "If I confessed to something truly terrible, how would you react? Let's say murder." Father Marco kept his expression neutral, though his hand tightened slightly on the steering wheel. "That wouldn't be a proper sacramental confession, just a conversation, but I would encourage you to turn yourself in to the authorities." Sure, Antonio smiled. "But let's imagine. What if I told you I killed someone, not out of anger or greed, but out of curiosity, to see what it would be like?" The priest's discomfort increased. "Mr. Antonio, I'd rather not." "It was in Milan 6 years ago," the man continued, ignoring the interruption. "A university professor. Nobody important. I followed him for weeks, studying his habits. The feeling was revealing." Father Marco swallowed hard, torn between stopping the car immediately or remaining calm so as not to provoke an unpredictable reaction. "Then came others," Antonio continued, his voice almost dreamy now. "A doctor in Turin, a lawyer in Rome. Each taught me something new about the art of turning lives into memories." "Sir, this conversation is taking an inappropriate turn," the priest intervened firmly. Antonio smiled. "Forgive me, Father, just hypothetical thoughts, of course. But do you know what I've discovered? That people of faith provide the most interesting reactions. The struggle between fear and hope in their eyes, it's almost transcendental." The priest realized with growing horror that the road now passed through a completely deserted area, centuries-old olive trees and cypresses, no sign of dwellings. GPS indicated that they had deviated from the main route. "It seems we took the wrong turn," he commented, trying to keep his voice steady. "Oh, we didn't miss it," Antonio replied softly. "I made a small adjustment to your GPS while you were filling up at that gas station. This road is much more private." It was then that Father Marco noticed the metal object partially visible under Antonio's coat, the handle of a knife. "Do you know why I chose you today, Father Marco Ricci?" Antonio asked, pronouncing his full name with disturbing precision. "Because I read about you in the papers. The priest who testified against that corrupt politician, even under threat. Admirable. People with unshakable principles have always intrigued me." "How do you know my full name?" asked the priest, mentally calculating the distance to the next bend, where he might try something desperate. "I research my experiences carefully," Antonio explained, "just as I researched others. I'd like to know their stories before creating our final moment together." The priest then realized the terrible truth. He was not hearing hypothetical or past confessions. He was hearing the meticulous plan for his own murder with a calm that surprised even himself. Father Marco did the only thing he could. He accelerated sharply, throwing the car against the guardrail at the next curve. The impact was violent. The airbag saved the priest from serious injuries, but Antonio, who had removed his seatbelt to reach his knife, was thrown against the windshield. Minutes later, a local farmer's car stopped to help. Antonio, seriously injured but conscious, was restrained until the police arrived, who found evidence in his backpack linking him to 3 unsolved murders, exactly as he had confessed. The subsequent investigation revealed that Antonio Vasali was a serial killer wanted in 3 countries, with a pattern of selecting morally interesting victims after extensive research. And so we come to the end of our 7 horror stories involving fatal hitchhikers. So which one scared you the most? Will any of these make you think twice about stopping your car for a stranger or accepting a ride? Tell us in the comments which one was your favorite. If you enjoyed this dive into the scary world of dangerous rides, don't forget to leave a like. This really helps the channel grow and encourages me to bring you more hair-raising stories. And if you're not a subscriber, yet take advantage now to subscribe and activate the bell.